The smell of stale coffee and frying bacon clung to Sarah Jenkins like a second skin. It was 6:15 a.m., and the Blue Plate Diner on the outskirts of Cincinnati was already starting to hum. Sarah moved with the efficient exhaustion only a single mother of two working 3 jobs truly understands. Her uniform, a pale blue polyester monstrosity, was clean, but the seams were starting to fray, much like her nerves. "Coffee, darling?" she asked Mr. Henderson, sliding the chipped ceramic mug across the counter without waiting for an answer. Mr. Henderson had been drinking black coffee here since the Eisenhower administration. He was reliable. The rest of the world, Sarah knew, was not. Rent was due next week. Little Mikey needed new glasses. The old ones were taped together at the bridge, and her car, bless its rusty soul, was making a noise that sounded suspiciously like an expensive surrender. Sarah was a fighter, though. She lived by a simple code: work hard, be honest, and never let the kids see you cry. Honesty wasn't a luxury. It was the foundation of the little dignity she had left. The morning rush hit, a blur of scrambling eggs and ringing checks. Sarah wiped down booth number 4, pushing the sticky syrup dispenser back into place. That's when he walked in. He didn't belong in the Blue Plate Diner, not even close. He was tall, maybe mid-50s, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that looked like it cost more than Sarah's entire annual salary. His shoes gleamed, reflecting the harsh fluorescent light, and he wore a watch, not a chunky, sporty thing, but something thin, silver, and utterly silent. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who never had to worry about running out of quarters for the laundromat. This was Elias Thorne. Now, Elias Thorne wasn't just wealthy, he was Thorne wealthy. He was the founder of Thorne Global, a massive tech and investment firm that practically ran itself, leaving him with excessive amounts of time and an even more excessive amount of money. Elias lived a life so far removed from the Blue Plate Diner that he might as well have been visiting from Mars. Lately, though, Elias had been feeling empty. He'd conquered business, accrued power, and bought everything worth buying. He even had a private island where his worst problem was deciding which vintage wine to pair with the sunset. But he was deeply cynical about people. He believed everyone had a price, that given enough pressure, integrity would shatter like cheap glass. He had a theory, a dark little hobby, really, of testing people, seeing exactly where the line was drawn between need and morality. He sat down in the clean booth, number 4, the one Sarah had just wiped down, and ordered the simplest thing on the menu: black coffee and a dry toasted bagel. Sarah approached him, notepad ready. She didn't recognize him, which was unusual for this neighborhood, but she treated him the same as she treated Mr. Henderson, with professional courtesy and a genuine, if tired, smile. "Morning, sir. Can I get you anything else?" Elias Thorne looked up. He had sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail: the crack in the vinyl seat, the slight tremor in Sarah's hand as she held the pen, the dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "Just the coffee, thank you," he said. His voice was smooth, low, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was the voice of a man who delegated feeling to his assistants. Sarah poured his coffee. The interaction was brief, purely transactional. Elias didn't linger. He pulled out a crisp $20 bill, placed it neatly on the table, took one sip of coffee, and stood up. He hadn't even touched the bagel. "Keep the change," he murmured, already heading toward the exit. Sarah watched him go, shaking her head slightly. Rich people were always the strangest tippers. $20 for a $3 coffee and a bagel? That was a good start to the day. She went back to the counter to handle a takeout order. A few minutes later, the rush had thinned to a trickle. Sarah returned to booth number 4 to bus the table. She stacked the plate and the untouched bagel, reaching across the cracked tabletop to grab the $20 bill. That's when she saw it. Tucked neatly against the wall, half hidden by the salt and pepper shakers, was a man's wallet. It was sleek black leather, clearly expensive, the kind that whispered custom-made rather than department store. Sarah frowned. Someone had left their wallet It had to be the fancy man. She picked it up. It felt heavy, too heavy. She was about to rush to the door, hoping to catch him, but something stopped her. Curiosity, maybe, or just the need to find an ID so she could call him if he was gone. She flipped open the wallet, and the bottom dropped out of her stomach. It wasn't just credit cards and a driver's license. The wallet was stuffed, absolutely bursting, with cash. Not fives and tens, hundreds. Stacks of crisp new $100 bills held together by a thick rubber band. They were so new they smelled like ink and paper mills. Sarah quickly snapped the wallet shut, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She glanced around the diner. Mr. Henderson was reading his paper. Jenny, the cook, was whistling in the back. Nobody was looking. She slipped the wallet into the deep pocket of her apron. Her hand trembled as she did it. She walked straight to the back storage room, a cramped space smelling of mop water and cleaning chemicals. She locked the door behind her, leaning against the cold cinder block wall, trying to catch her breath. Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. Just count it. She pulled the wallet out again, her fingers shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She opened it, pulling out the thick wad of money. She laid it out on a dusty shelf next to a box of napkins. She started counting, her lips moving silently. 100, 200, 300. It kept going, past 1,000, past 5,000. When she reached $10,000, she stopped. Her eyes were wide, staring at the small mountain of currency. It was an amount of money so large, so utterly fantastical, that it seemed to mock her poverty. $10,000, cash, right here, in her hands. A small, insidious voice, born of months of stress and exhaustion, whispered in her ear. Nobody saw you take it. He's rich. He probably won't even miss it for a week. Your rent is $1,800. Mikey needs his glasses. You could fix the car. You could breathe. The temptation was a physical weight, pressing down on her chest. It was the solution to every single problem that kept her awake at night, staring at the cracked plaster ceiling. It was freedom. She closed her eyes, picturing Mikey's face, his sweet, slightly blurry smile. She pictured her mother, who had always told her, "Honey, you can lose everything, but you can't lose your good name." Sarah took a deep, shuddering breath. The air in the storage room felt thick and suffocating. No, she couldn't. She absolutely could not. She couldn't live with that kind of shadow over her soul. The money would buy her temporary relief, but the guilt, the shame, that would be permanent. It would poison every meal she served her children. She gathered the money, stuffing it back into the expensive leather wallet. She checked the ID. Elias Thorne. The address was a massive penthouse suite downtown. Of course it was. She had to find him. She unlocked the storage room door and slipped back into the main diner area. Her shift was almost over. She walked up to the counter, her face pale, and leaned in close to Jenny the cook, who was wiping down the grill. "Jenny, listen to me. Did you see the man in the suit who was sitting in booth 4? Jenny shrugged, not looking up. "The stiff?" "Yeah, looked like he got lost on the way to a board meeting." "Why?" "He left his wallet. I need to find him. Now." "Call the number on the ID, Sarah, or wait till he calls the diner. He'll realize it's gone." "No, I can't wait," Sarah insisted, gripping the edge of the counter. "I have a feeling about this. He didn't look like the type to forget things. He looked precise." Because she knew she couldn't just drop this wallet in the lost and found. This wasn't a misplaced umbrella. This was an astronomical sum of money. If anyone else found it, it was gone forever. Sarah finished her shift in a daze, the heavy wallet burning a hole in her apron pocket. She clocked out exactly at 2 p.m., waved goodbye to Jenny, and walked out the back door into the weak afternoon sun. Her old beat-up sedan, a relic named Betsy, was parked under a sickly-looking oak tree. She got in, started the engine, praying it would catch, and pulled out her phone. She looked at the address on Elias Thorne's ID, 4400 Grand Avenue, Penthouse 52A. It was a 40-minute drive straight into the heart of the city, right into the territory of glass towers and million-dollar views. It was a world she only saw on the evening news. She didn't hesitate. She put the car in drive. Meanwhile, 45 minutes earlier, Elias Thorne was sitting in the back of his customized black sedan, watching the Blue Plate diner shrink in the rearview mirror. He wasn't worried about the wallet. He wasn't worried about the $10,000 cash. He was waiting. He had orchestrated the entire scenario with meticulous care. He had made sure the wallet was placed exactly where she would find it after he left. He had calculated the precise moment she would be alone to bust the table. His assistant, Mark, who was sitting in the passenger seat, cleared his throat nervously. Mark was used to handling multi-million-dollar deals, but this little social experiment of Elias's made him deeply uncomfortable. "Sir, are you sure about this? $10,000 is a significant amount to just leave." Elias didn't take his eyes off the diner. "It's a fraction of a fraction, Mark. Besides, I need to know the answer." "The answer to what?" "The value of a soul, Mark. The price point of desperation. That woman, Sarah, she's clearly struggling. She has the look of a person who sleeps 4 hours a night and worries the rest of the time. If she keeps it, she proves my point. Everyone breaks. If she returns it, then perhaps I have misjudged the world." "And if she returns it, what then?" Mark asked. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Elias's lips. "If she returns it, Mark, then the test begins." Elias had already run background checks on Sarah Jenkins before he even stepped foot in the diner. He knew about the medical bills, the eviction notice scare from 6 months ago, and the fact that she was trying to save up for community college courses in bookkeeping. He knew exactly how much that $10,000 meant to her. He pulled out his phone. "I want a live feed of the diner's exterior. Tell the surveillance team to track her movements once she leaves work." Mark nodded, relaying the instructions with military precision. Elias leaned back, his expression unreadable. He waited for the call from the diner, the inevitable panicked message saying, "We found your wallet, sir," but the phone remained silent. 15 minutes passed. 20. "Sir," Mark said, checking his watch. "She should have called by now, or at least asked the manager to call." Elias shifted. "Give it time. She is currently in the storage room, wrestling with her conscience. It's the most important negotiation of her life." 30 minutes. Still silence. Elias felt a familiar surge of cold satisfaction. Ah, there it is. The predictable outcome. He had been right all along. She had taken the money. She was probably already making plans. He felt a dull, familiar disappointment. He was about to instruct Mark to cancel the test and move on to the next cynical venture when Mark's phone buzzed. "Sir, we have eyes on her. She just left the diner. She's in her vehicle." "Where is she headed?" Elias asked, his voice sharp. Mark checked the GPS coordinates being fed to him. He frowned, looking genuinely confused. "Sir, she's not headed home. She's headed downtown. She's on the I-71 South. Looks like she's coming straight toward the Grand Avenue Tower." Elias Thorne sat bolt upright. He hadn't expected this. Not at all. "She's coming here?" "Yes, sir. Based on her route, she's driving to the address listed on the ID." A genuine spark of intrigue, a feeling Elias hadn't experienced in years, ignited in his chest. "Mark, expedite the route. I want to be in the lobby when she arrives. And Mark, no one is to interfere. I want to see this unfold naturally." Sarah gripped the steering wheel of Betsy, her knuckles white. The traffic was awful, bumper to bumper, and every stoplight felt like an eternity. She kept glancing into her rearview mirror, half expecting a police car to flash its lights, convinced she looked guilty just by possessing the wallet. She finally pulled off the highway and navigated the labyrinth of polished steel and glass towers. The air here was different, cleaner, colder, and heavy with the scent of money. She found the address, 4400 Grand Avenue. The building was a monolith, soaring into the sky, its entrance guarded by polished granite and a formidable security desk. Sarah found a spot down the street, illegally parked, and turned off the engine. The silence felt deafening. She reached into her apron pocket, retrieved the wallet, and held it in her hand. It felt less like a solution and more like a ticking time bomb. She walked up to the massive revolving glass doors. She felt utterly out of place. Her shoes were worn, her uniform stained by a rogue splash of mustard from the lunch rush. She looked like a lost mouse in a marble palace. She approached the security desk, where a man in a crisp uniform sat behind a bank of monitors. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to see Mr. Elias Thorne. I have something of his." The security guard looked her up and down slowly, his expression one of polite disdain. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Thorne?" "No, I work at the Blue Plate Diner. He left this." She held up the black leather wallet. The guard's eyes widened momentarily, recognizing the quality of the leather. "I see. Mr. Thorne is not available for unscheduled visits. He is in the penthouse. I can take that for you and have it delivered." "No," Sarah said firmly. This wasn't about delivery. This was about doing the right thing, straight into the hands of the owner. "I need to give it to him directly. It's very important. It has a lot of cash in it." The guard sighed, clearly annoyed by this disturbance to the building's perfect order. He reached for the phone. Before he could dial, a voice cut across the vast marble lobby, resonating with authority. "That won't be necessary, Miller." Sarah turned. Elias Thorne was standing a few feet away, emerging from a private elevator bank. He hadn't changed his clothes, still wearing the expensive charcoal suit. He looked exactly the same as he had in the diner, imposing, detached, and utterly controlled. He walked toward her slowly, his eyes fixed on the wallet in her hand. Sarah felt a rush of relief so profound it almost made her knees buckle. The ordeal was over. "Sir, Mr. Thorne," she stammered, holding out the wallet. "You left this at the diner, booth 4. I was worried." Elias Thorne took the wallet. He didn't thank her immediately. He simply looked at the wallet, then back at her, his gaze penetrating, analytical. It felt less like a man receiving his property, and more like a scientist observing a specimen. He opened the wallet, checked the cash, counted the stack of hundreds with a quick, practiced thumb, and confirmed the full $10,000 was there. Then he looked back at Sarah. "You drove 40 minutes during your busy day to return this," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact he was processing. "Yes, sir. I couldn't just leave it. It's a lot of money." "It is," he agreed. He paused, making the silence stretch, forcing Sarah to stand there under the intense scrutiny. "You work at the Blue Plate Diner. I saw your uniform. You don't make much money, do you, Sarah?" She stiffened slightly at the directness of the question. "I make enough to get by, sir." $10,000 would solve a lot of problems for someone who is just getting by. Sarah swallowed hard. This was the moment. She felt a flash of anger. He was making this sound like an interrogation, like she needed a medal for not stealing. "Sir, whether I'm rich or poor doesn't change the fact that this is your property. I wouldn't keep something that wasn't mine." Elias Thorne slowly pulled the stack of cash from the wallet. He held the $10,000 in his hand, a thick block of currency. "I believe you, Sarah," he said. He extended his hand, holding the money out to her. "Take it." Sarah stared at the cash, then back at his face. She was completely bewildered. "I beg your pardon?" "The money. It's yours. A reward for your honesty. $10,000. Sarah shook her head immediately, stepping back slightly. "No, sir, absolutely not. I don't want a reward. I just did what anyone should do. I don't want to be paid for being honest." Elias Thorne's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He hadn't expected this rejection. He had expected her to take the money, perhaps with a moment of false humility, but to take it nonetheless. "Nonsense. This is a token of my appreciation. Take it. Consider it a bonus. Mr. Thorne, I appreciate the offer, but I came all this way to return your money, not to take more of it. If you want to thank me, a simple thank you is fine. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to my car before I get a ticket." She turned to leave. She had done her duty. The heavy weight of responsibility was gone. Now, she just needed to get back to her life. Elias Thorne watched her retreat toward the glass doors. He was genuinely taken aback. This was not in his script. He was used to people taking what was offered, especially when it was substantial. "Wait, Sarah!" he called out. She stopped, turning back reluctantly. Elias walked closer, the $10,000 still in his hand. "You refuse the money because you believe honesty shouldn't be bought. I respect that. But I insist on compensating you for your time and effort. This is not payment for honesty. This is reimbursement for gas and lost wages." He peeled off a single $100 bill from the stack and offered it to her. $100 for the trip downtown. Sarah hesitated. $100 was significant. It was almost a full day's wages at the diner, and it would easily cover the cost of the gas she'd burned driving into the city. Thank you, sir, she said softly, taking the single bill. She folded it neatly and slipped it into her pocket, separate from the wallet. You're welcome, Sarah, Elias said, a thoughtful look replacing his usual cynicism. He watched her walk out the door and disappear into the street traffic. Elias Thorne stood in the silent, echoing lobby, holding the $9,900 that Sarah had rejected. He had tested her desperation, and she had passed. But the test, he realized, was far from over. He looked at the security guard, Miller, who was pretending to be busy, but was clearly listening intently. Miller, did you get the name of that woman? Yes, sir, Sarah Jenkins. Works at the Blue Plate Diner. Elias nodded slowly. Get me Mark. I want a full report on her situation, her children, her debts, everything. I don't just want to know if she's honest, Miller. I want to know why she can afford to be. He walked back toward the private elevator, the rejection of the $10,000 echoing in his mind. For the first time in a long time, Elias Thorne felt a flicker of genuine curiosity, a desire to understand a human being who operated outside the predictable parameters of greed he had come to expect. He reached the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. The doors slid shut, leaving the polished lobby silent once more. Sarah, meanwhile, was speeding back toward her side of town, the single $100 bill feeling heavy and earned. She felt a lightness she hadn't felt in months. She was tired. She was broke, but she was square with the world. She had no idea that Elias Thorne's test had only just begun, and that rejecting his money was the single most important decision of her life. He wasn't done watching her, not by a long shot. He was now determined to push her boundaries further, to see if her honesty was a temporary shield or an unbreakable core. As Elias Thorne sat in his penthouse suite, looking out over the sprawling city, he made a decision. He wasn't going to just reward her. He was going to challenge her foundation. He was going to insert himself into her world, subtly at first, to see if genuine goodness could survive the persistent pressure of massive opportunity. His phone rang. It was Mark. Mark, I want you to make a few calls, Elias instructed, his voice calm yet intense. First, find out who owns the Blue Plate Diner. Second, I need a list of all available properties in Sarah Jenkins's neighborhood suitable for a small, high-end commercial renovation. And third, I need the name of a reliable, discreet investigator. I want to know everything about her struggle, and I want to know it yesterday. Mark paused on the other end. Sir, with all due respect, what exactly are we building here? Elias looked down at the remaining $9,900 in his hand. We are building a scenario, Mark. We are going to find out if Sarah Jenkins's honesty is truly priceless or if it just requires a higher bid. The game was officially on. But Sarah Jenkins had no idea she was the main player. She was just focused on getting home in time to help Mikey with his homework and maybe, just maybe, use that $100 to buy the tape needed to fix those glasses for good. She was thinking small, while a billionaire high above the city was planning something very, very big. Now, when Elias Thorne got an idea in his head, it wasn't just an idea, it was a corporate takeover. He wasn't the type of man to simply admire a diamond. He had to understand the geological forces that created it. And Sarah Jenkins, with her stubborn, unshakable honesty, was the most fascinating geological specimen he had encountered in decades. He stood in his penthouse office, the city glittering below him like scattered change, and he spoke to Mark, his assistant, in a voice that was calm yet humming with purpose. Mark, I misspoke earlier. I don't just want to know why she can afford to be honest. I want to know if that honesty can withstand genuine prosperity. Poverty is a terrible teacher, but wealth is the true test of character. Mark, ever the professional, had already compiled a detailed file on Sarah. He laid it out on the polished mahogany desk. Sir, the background check is complete. Sarah Jenkins, 42. 2 children, Mikey, 10, Chloe, 7. Works 3 jobs. Current main income is the diner. Major debt is medical. Her son's eye condition requires specialized care not fully covered by her insurance. She lives in a rental near the West Side. She has been trying to save for community college tuition to study bookkeeping, but obviously that fund is negligible. Elias tapped the photo of Sarah in her blue polyester uniform. Bookkeeping. Interesting. She seeks structure and accountability, even in her aspirations. Sir, about the Blue Plate Diner, Mark continued, referring to the first instruction. It's owned by an elderly gentleman named Frank Peterson. He's been trying to sell for years. He's tired. His price is reasonable given the location. Elias didn't hesitate. Buy it. Today, I want it done through a holding company, Grandview Acquisitions. No direct link to Thorn Global, no paper trail leading back to me. Frank Peterson gets his asking price plus 50% bonus for immediate closure and discretion. I want the deed signed before sunrise tomorrow. Mark swallowed hard. This was an extraordinarily fast acquisition for a greasy spoon diner, but he knew better than to question the speed of Elias's current fixation. Understood, sir. And the properties in her neighborhood? I need a small, viable commercial space near her home, something she would pass every day, something currently vacant, but structurally sound. I want to use that space to launch the next phase of the test. And the investigator? He needs to be discreet. I don't want Sarah to feel surveilled. I want him to track her financial situation after we intervene. I need to know every decision she makes, every dollar she spends. We are creating a controlled environment, Mark, a moral laboratory. The next few days were a blur of high finance and low-key real estate maneuvering. Elias Thorne, the man who shaped global markets, was now obsessively focused on buying a small, brick-and-mortar diner on the edge of Cincinnati. Meanwhile, Sarah Jenkins was living a small, beautiful moment of relief. The $100 Elias had given her went straight to the most pressing emergency. She took Mikey to the optometrist, who made custom lenses. "Look, Mom, I can see the leaves on that tree," Mikey exclaimed, spinning around on the sidewalk outside the clinic, his new, sturdy blue frames perfectly fitted to his small face. Sarah watched him, a lump forming in her throat. That $100 had bought her son clarity and safety. It was the purest money she had ever earned. She felt a surge of gratitude toward the strange, cold billionaire, not for the money, but for the validation of her choice. She had been honest, and in a small way the world had rewarded her for it. Life at the Blue Plate Diner, however, was about to change. 3 days after the wallet incident, Frank Peterson, the old owner, gathered the staff in the back, tears welling up in his eyes. "Kids," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I sold the place. Today was my last day. Grandview Acquisitions is taking over. They're a big outfit, moving into local markets. They promised no immediate layoffs, but things are going to be different." A wave of dread washed over the staff. Change in a place like the Blue Plate Diner usually meant worse hours, less pay, or, worst of all, a new manager who didn't know the difference between a hash brown and a home fry. Sarah felt a familiar tightening in her stomach. Just when she thought she had stabilized, the ground shifted again. The next morning, the diner doors opened to a slightly jarring sight. The old, worn checkout counter was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern tablet system. The chipped mugs had been replaced by heavier, gleaming white porcelain. It was still the Blue Plate Diner, but it felt like it had been polished with a high-powered corporate buffer. And then there was Brenda. Brenda was the new manager, sent in by Grandview Acquisitions. She was sharp, dressed in business casual that looked wildly out of place next to the smell of old grease, and she carried a clipboard like a weapon. Brenda was efficient, humorless, and immediately began implementing new synergy protocols. Sarah, who valued efficiency, tried to adapt. She worked harder, moving faster, trying to prove her worth to the new regime. 2 weeks into the new ownership, Brenda called Sarah into the cramped, newly painted office in the back. "Sarah, sit down," Brenda said, gesturing to a plastic chair. "I've been reviewing the staff files. Your performance metrics are outstanding. You're reliable, you handle stress well, and you have a perfect attendance record." Sarah nodded, bracing herself for a new, demanding schedule. "Grandview Acquisitions is impressed," Brenda continued, flipping open a folder. "We're not just buying this diner. We're looking to expand our local footprint. We need people we can trust. This was it, Sarah thought. The offer for more hours, maybe $1 raise. We're offering you a promotion, Sarah, a significant one. Brenda slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a job offer. Operations Coordinator, Local Acquisitions. Sarah stared at the salary figure. Her eyes widened. It wasn't a raise. It was a transformation. It was $75,000 per year. She looked up at Brenda, convinced this was a joke. $75,000? For what exactly? It's a transitional role, Brenda explained, leaning forward conspiratorially. Grandview is acquiring another small commercial property nearby. We need a trusted local liaison to manage the initial construction phase and handle the local payroll and accounts, reporting directly to me. Since you've been saving up to study bookkeeping, this is a perfect real-world opportunity. We'll even pay for your tuition at Cincinnati State. Sarah's hands were shaking. $75,000. Tuition paid. This wasn't just solving her problems. This was annihilating them. This was college funds, a real car, health insurance that didn't leave her terrified every time Mikey sneezed. I don't know what to say, Sarah whispered, tracing the number with her finger. Say yes, Brenda prompted, smiling professionally. You start immediately. Your first task will be overseeing the renovation of our new property, the old bakery space on Elm Street. We need someone to manage the invoices and sign off on the contractor payments. Sarah took the papers home that night. She couldn't sleep. She spread the job offer out on her kitchen table, studying every line. It was real. It was her escape route. The next day, she accepted. How could she not? Elias Thorne received the news from Mark with a quiet sense of triumph. She accepted the operations coordinator role, sir. Her first day is Monday. We have secured the old Elm Street bakery space, and the renovation schedule is aggressive. She will be the primary point of contact for all payments. Elias smiled faintly. Excellent. Now, Mark, listen closely. The salary of $75,000 is generous, but the real test is in the details of the job. I want the invoices she handles to be complex, not overtly fraudulent, but messy. I want the contractor bids to be inflated, but plausibly so. And I want the payroll documents to include an extra phantom employee, a small recurring padding. Mark looked horrified. Sir, you want her to commit fraud? No, Mark. I want to see if she notices the fraud. And if she notices, I want to see if she signs the checks anyway. We are testing her vigilance and her willingness to challenge authority, especially when that authority is paying her enough to change her life. Elias leaned back, running a hand over the smooth leather of his chair. If she questions the numbers, she risks losing the job, the salary, and the tuition. That is the pressure point. Does she choose comfort and silence, or financial peril and integrity? The next few weeks were a dizzying ascent for Sarah. She quit her other 2 part-time jobs and traded her blue uniform for professional attire, thrift store finds but clean and crisp. She still worked at the diner in the mornings, training her replacement, but her afternoons were spent at the new property on Elm Street. The old bakery was being gutted and transformed into what Brenda vaguely called a boutique commercial space. Sarah was suddenly dealing with contractors named Vinny and Rick, who spoke a language of load-bearing walls and dry rot remediation. She threw herself into the work, spending evenings studying basic accounting principles to keep up. She was determined to prove that Grandview Acquisitions hadn't made a mistake. The money started flowing in. Her first paycheck was staggering. She paid her rent 2 months in advance. She bought the kids new clothes. She even started putting money into the savings account for the tuition that Grandview had promised to cover. But soon, the complexity of the job began to feel heavy. She was responsible for reviewing and signing off on all invoices before they went to the main office for payment processing. The documents were overwhelming. Hundreds of line items for plumbing, electrical, and structural materials. One Friday afternoon, sitting at a folding table in the dusty Elm Street space, Sarah was reviewing the invoice from the main carpentry contractor. Her elementary bookkeeping studies kicked in. She saw a charge for 20 sheets of specialized, high-density plywood. The price per sheet was listed at $120. Sarah frowned. She had checked prices online just last week for a different project. That specific plywood was usually around $85 a sheet retail. A large contractor should be getting it for $75 or less. She pulled out her calculator. The markup was significant, almost $900 extra on this single item. Maybe it includes delivery, she thought, trying to be fair. Maybe it's union labor? She kept reviewing. She found another discrepancy, a charge for 50 hours of emergency overtime, billed to a Tuesday afternoon, when she knew for a fact the crew had left the site at 4:30 p.m. The discrepancies were small, but they added up. They were hidden in the noise of thousands of dollars in construction costs. They were exactly the kind of things a busy, untrained operations coordinator would overlook. Sarah felt that familiar, cold knot in her stomach, the same feeling she had when she first opened Elias Thorne's wallet. She went to Brenda the next morning, clutching the suspicious invoice. "Brenda, I need to talk to you about the carpentry invoice for the Elm Street site," Sarah said, trying to sound professional, not accusatory. Brenda sighed, not looking up from her laptop. "Yes, Sarah? Did you sign off on it? We need to push that payment through today." "No, I haven't signed it. There are some questionable charges here. The plywood cost is inflated by at least 40%, and there's an overtime charge that doesn't match the site log." Brenda finally looked up, her expression shifting from impatience to something colder. "Sarah, you need to understand how large-scale acquisitions work. These are established contractors. We work with standard industry rates, and sometimes those rates include rush fees or other incidentals. You are not a procurement specialist. You are coordinating the paperwork. Your job is to verify the existence of the service, not to audit the price down to the penny." "But it's almost $1,000 over what it should be," Sarah insisted. "That's wasted money. If I sign this, I'm saying I agree the price is legitimate." Brenda leaned back, her voice dropping slightly, becoming subtly threatening. "Sarah, we hired you for your reliability and your efficiency. We did not hire you to disrupt established relationships or question our vendors. This is how the system works. Sign the invoice, submit the payment request, and move on to the electrical bids." The message was clear. Sign it or face consequences. Sarah felt the weight of the $75,000 salary pressing down on her. She thought of Mikey, his clear eyesight, the 2 months of paid rent. If she pushed this, she would be labeled difficult. She could lose everything she had just gained. She stood there, the invoice crumpled slightly in her hand, caught between the promise of stability and the demand for compliance. High above the city, Elias Thorne was watching the feed from a hidden camera placed discreetly in the office at the Blue Plate Diner. He saw the exchange between Sarah and Brenda, who was in fact an actress hired specifically for this role, coached by Mark. "She's resisting the inflation, Mark," Elias murmured, fascinated. "She's prioritizing $900 of the company's money over her entire future. Most people would rationalize this away instantly. It's just corporate money. They won't miss it." "Brenda played the pressure card, sir," Mark replied, watching the monitor. "She made it clear that signing is mandatory for continued employment." "Now we wait for the decision," Elias said. "This is the true crucible. The first test was passive, return stolen money. This test is active. Compromise your principles to keep earned money." The camera showed Sarah walking out of the office, her face pale, the invoice still in her hand. She didn't sign it immediately. She went back to the counter, mechanically wiping down the freshly polished stainless steel. She worked the rest of her shift in a fog, the voice of Brenda echoing in her head. This is how the system works. When she got home, she didn't talk about it. She helped Mikey with his math homework, kissed Chloe goodnight, and then retreated to the kitchen table. She pulled out the invoice and the job offer. On one side, a life of security. On the other, her good name. She knew deep in her soul that if she signed that invoice, she was taking the first step onto a slippery slope. Today it was $900 in inflated plywood. Tomorrow it would be something bigger. She would be complicit. She would be the poor woman who finally succumbed to the system's quiet corruption. She remembered her mother's words, "You can lose everything, but you can't lose your good name." Sarah picked up her phone and called Brenda's work number. even though it was 9:30 p.m. Brenda answered, sounding annoyed. "Yes, Sarah?" "Brenda, it's about the invoice," Sarah stated, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "I cannot sign it in good conscience. I verified the pricing with 3 different suppliers today. The contractor is overcharging Grandview Acquisitions by 38% on the materials alone. I can't approve a payment that I know is fraudulent." A long, chilling silence stretched across the line. "Sarah, I told you this is not your decision to make," Brenda finally said, her voice icy. "You are challenging the integrity of a key vendor and ignoring a direct instruction from your manager." "I'm protecting the company's assets," Sarah countered, surprised by her own courage. "I can't do this job if I have to lie on paper." "I won't." "Fine, Sarah," Brenda snapped. "If you refuse to perform the basic duties of your position, then we have a serious problem. I will inform the main office tomorrow. Don't come into the Elm Street site until you hear from me." The line went dead. Sarah placed the phone back in its cradle. Her heart was pounding, but the knot in her stomach was gone. It was replaced by a hollow, sickening realization. She had just thrown away $75,000, paid tuition, and the best opportunity of her life. She looked at the job offer one last time, then slowly, deliberately, ripped it in half. She was unemployed again, except for the few remaining shifts at the diner. She was back to square one, but she was clean. The next morning, Elias Thorne watched the final interaction video, his face a mask of awe. "She did it," he breathed, leaning back in his chair. "She chose principle over prosperity. She literally fired herself to save us $900. Mark, who had been genuinely worried about Sarah's future, looked relieved and slightly stunned. "Sir, I've never seen anything like it. She walked away from a life-changing salary." Elias stood up, walking toward the window. The cynicism that had defined him for years was finally cracking. "Mark, this is not just honesty. This is a commitment to a moral code that is absolute. She is not operating on a sliding scale. She is a foundation of integrity in a world built on compromise." Elias felt a genuine, unfamiliar warmth. He realized that his test had failed to prove his point, that everyone has a price, but it had succeeded in restoring a piece of his own lost faith. "The test is over, Mark," Elias declared. "She passed. Now the reward begins." "Sir? What kind of reward?" "A permanent one, something that honors her principles, not just her poverty. First, call Brenda and terminate her contract immediately. Tell her the acquisition team found her accounting methods unacceptable. Then, I want you to go to the Elm Street site, pay off the fraudulent contractor, but make it clear they are blacklisted from Grandview Acquisitions forever." Sarah's audit was correct. Elias paced the room, the ideas coming fast now. This wasn't a cynical exercise. It was a mission of redemption. "And Sarah, we need to handle this delicately. She cannot know I am involved. Her pride is as strong as her morality." "How do we get her the reward without her knowing?" Mark asked. "We don't give her money, Mark. We give her opportunity, built on her own merit. Remember that bookkeeping course she wanted to take? We're going to give her a chance to use those skills without the pressure of having to compromise." Elias picked up the phone. "Call the local community college. I want to establish a scholarship fund in Frank Peterson's name, the previous diner owner. A full ride, including books and childcare stipends, for one deserving student seeking a degree in business or accounting. I want the criteria to match Sarah Jenkins's profile exactly. Single mother, working in the service industry, demonstrable commitment to ethics." Mark began dialing furiously. "A scholarship. That's brilliant, sir. She'll think it's a random act of kindness." "It is not random, Mark. It is surgical. But that's only the beginning. We need to secure her future." Elias looked down at the Blue Plate Diner, now officially owned by his shell company. "Mark, I want to establish a new position at the diner. Not manager, not coordinator, something independent. I want Sarah to be the independent financial auditor for the Blue Plate Diner, a separate contract reporting directly to the new ownership, Grandview Acquisitions. Her salary will be $50,000, secure and guaranteed, for 5 years. Her job description is simple. She audits all incoming and outgoing payments, ensuring 100% honesty and transparency. She is paid to be honest, and if she finds fraud, she reports it directly to me, anonymously, of course, through a secure channel. Mark dropped his pen. Sir, you are paying her to be the conscience of the company. Precisely. We're turning her moral compass into a professional asset. It's the only way she'll accept the money, if she feels she is earning it through her integrity. Within 48 hours, the pieces were moving. Sarah was still reeling from the sudden loss of the coordinator job, back to scrambling for extra shifts at the diner, when Brenda walked in looking defeated. Sarah, the main office reviewed the Elm Street invoices, Brenda said, her voice flat. They found significant discrepancies in the contractor billing. You were right. The contractor has been terminated, and as for me, I'm being replaced, effective immediately. Sarah stared. She had been right. The company had actually listened. I'm sorry, Sarah, Brenda added, with a strange mix of resentment and admiration. You were too honest for that job, maybe too honest for this company. Brenda left, and a few hours later, a genuinely new manager, a kind older woman named Mrs. Rodriguez, took over. On Friday, Sarah received a thick envelope in the mail from Grandview Acquisitions. She opened it nervously, expecting a final severance check. Inside was a letter detailing the new independent financial auditor position, along with the 5-year guaranteed contract for $50,000 a year and the specific duties. To ensure the ethical integrity of our local operations, we require an independent auditor with a proven commitment to transparency and moral standards. The ideal candidate must have recently demonstrated a willingness to prioritize corporate integrity over personal gain. The job was tailored exactly to her recent actions. Sarah sat down hard on her worn sofa. $50,000, a stable income, secure for 5 years. A job that paid her to do what she believed in. She didn't understand how this opportunity had landed in her lap, but she recognized the value of the offer. It wasn't charity. It was a contract for her expertise, her integrity. She signed it immediately. A few days later, she received another letter, this time from Cincinnati State Community College, informing her of a new scholarship, the Frank Peterson Legacy Fund for Ethical Business Students. She was encouraged to apply based on her years of service and recent professional endorsements, which, unbeknownst to her, Elias had arranged. Sarah applied and was accepted. She was going to college. She was going to be an auditor. Her life, built on the unsteady foundation of 3 minimum wage jobs, was suddenly solid. Elias Thorne watched the entire process unfold from afar. He saw the acceptance of the job, the enrollment in the college, and the clear relief in her face captured by the discreet security cameras he still had monitoring the diner. The ultimate test, he realized, was not whether she would steal, but whether she would compromise. She had proven she would not. He sat with Mark, finalizing the paperwork for the permanent endowment of the Frank Peterson Scholarship Fund. Mark, the final piece, Elias said, I want you to find a way to anonymously pay off the rest of her medical debt, Mikey's outstanding bills. Use a foundation. Make it untraceable. I want her to start her new life completely clean. Understood, sir. So the experiment is concluded? Mark asked. Elias leaned back, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. The experiment is concluded, Mark, and the results are astonishing. There are people in this world who cannot be bought, no matter the price. Sarah Jenkins is one of them. He paused, looking out at the city lights. And now I have a new project. I need to figure out what to do with a $50 million investment firm that just bought a $3 coffee shop. The Blue Plate Diner, sir? Yes. It's no longer a test site, Mark. It's now the headquarters of the Thorne Global Integrity Initiative. We're going to use it as a case study. We're going to staff it with people like Sarah, pay them well, and prove that ethical business practices are not just morally superior, but financially viable. Elias Thorne, the cynical billionaire, had been transformed by a single mother's decision to return $10,000. He hadn't just tested her honesty. He had found his own lost purpose. He was going to spend the next phase of his life proving that integrity was the most valuable asset in the world. Sarah Jenkins, the new independent financial auditor, walked into the Blue Plate Diner the next morning wearing a clean, smart blouse and carrying her new college textbooks. She greeted Mrs. Rodriguez and headed straight for the small, secure office the new owners had built just for her. She was paid to be honest. She was going to college to learn how to be a better auditor. She had no idea who was behind her sudden good fortune, only that she had earned it, not by asking for it, but by refusing to compromise when it mattered most. The coffee smelled fresh, the new equipment gleamed, and the future, for the first time in a very long time, looked incredibly bright. The quiet game was over, and Sarah Jenkins had won far more than she could have ever imagined. But Elias Thorne, the man who had orchestrated it all, was about to step out of the shadows and truly change her world forever. He had one final breathtaking move left to play. Sarah Jenkins, the newly minted independent financial auditor, settled into her new routine with the quiet joy of a person who finally felt the ground beneath their feet. The Blue Plate Diner, under the steady hand of Mrs. Rodriguez, was thriving. It felt cleaner, the staff morale was up, and the new audit system Sarah was implementing was surprisingly straightforward. Her job was to review the books, ensure every receipt matched every expense, and flag any discrepancies. She was paid well to be meticulously honest, and she loved it. In the afternoons, she attended classes at Cincinnati State, juggling accounting principles with the reality of raising 2 kids. Mikey's vision was perfect, and Chloe was thriving. The constant grinding fear that had been her companion for years was finally lifting. She often thought about the strange, cold man in the charcoal suit, Elias Thorne. She had returned his money, and somehow the universe had responded by delivering her the job she was currently performing. It felt like karma, a profound validation that honesty truly paid off, not in quick cash, but in earned stability. She never suspected the extent of the invisible hand guiding her fate. A few weeks after starting her college courses, Sarah received a formal invitation delivered by courier to the diner. It was printed on heavy cream-colored stationery bearing the discreet logo of Grandview Acquisitions. It read, "Ms. Jenkins, the ownership of Grandview Acquisitions requests a brief, confidential meeting to discuss the future of the Integrity Initiative. Lunch this Friday, 1 p.m., at your place of employment." Sarah felt a surge of professional nervousness. She was an auditor. She reported to them. She didn't usually meet with them. On Friday, she dressed carefully in her best thrift store blazer. She made sure the audit reports were flawless. She was ready. Exactly at 1 p.m., after the lunch rush had cleared and only Mr. Henderson remained nursing his coffee in booth 4, the front door swung open. It wasn't Brenda. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Elias Thorne. He was wearing the same charcoal suit, the same gleaming shoes, and the same silent, expensive watch. He looked around the diner, not with the detached curiosity of a wealthy tourist, but with the proprietary air of an owner. He walked straight toward the booth Sarah was waiting in. Mrs. Rodriguez, the manager, scurried over, looking nervous. "Mr. Thorne, sir, welcome. Is everything to your liking?" Elias gave a brief, dismissive nod. "Everything is exactly as it should be, Mrs. Rodriguez." "Thank you. Please, leave us." Mrs. Rodriguez retreated quickly. Sarah stared at Elias Thorne, a cold realization dawning on her. "You're the owner," she stated flatly. "Grandview Acquisitions. It's you." Elias sat down opposite her, his sharp eyes fixed on her face. He didn't deny it. "In a manner of speaking, yes, Sarah. I own the building, the business, and I paid for the new porcelain mugs. And the $75,000 job? The Elm Street site? That was you, too?" "Every detail, Sarah. Every single detail." Sarah felt a mixture of profound shock and a deep, burning resentment. She had been tested. She hadn't earned this opportunity. It had been engineered. "You set me up," she accused, her voice low and tight. "The wallet, the $10,000, the inflated invoices. You were watching me the whole time." Elias leaned forward, his expression softening slightly, a rare sight. "I was, Sarah, and I owe you an apology for the method, but not for the outcome. I came here a cynical man, convinced that everyone, given enough pressure, would fold. You had every reason to take that $10,000. You had every reason to sign that fraudulent invoice and secure your children's future. Poverty is a merciless master. He paused, letting his words sink in. But you didn't fold, Sarah. You showed me that integrity is not a luxury reserved for the wealthy. It is a choice made by those who value their character above all else. You chose the moral peril of unemployment over the comfort of complicity. He reached into his inner pocket, not pulling out a wallet, but a small, sleek tablet. He slid it across the table. The $50,000 auditor job, the scholarship, those were the initial rewards for passing the test. They were designed to give you the stability you earned. Look at this, Sarah. Sarah picked up the tablet, her hands still shaking slightly from the shock of the revelation. The screen showed a complex organizational chart. At the top was Thorn Global, and branching off it was a new division, Thorn Global Integrity Initiative. I told Mark the experiment was over, but the mission had just begun, Elias explained, his voice gaining the passion of a true visionary. You didn't just pass a test, Sarah. You created a blueprint. I am restructuring a significant portion of my philanthropic and investment efforts around the principle you demonstrated here: absolute, uncompromising integrity. He pointed to a box on the organizational chart, high up, directly beneath his own name. The title was Director of Ethics and Compliance, Thorn Global Integrity Initiative. I need someone to run this division, someone who has faced the true cost of honesty and chosen it anyway. Someone who understands that a $1,000 markup can ruin a soul faster than $1 million heist. He looked directly into her eyes. I am offering you this position, Sarah. It requires you to finish your degree, which we will continue to pay for, but your primary responsibility will be to build the infrastructure of trust within my global operations. You will audit, you will advise, and you will enforce a code of ethics that you personally defined. Sarah stared at the title. Director, Global Compliance. It was a role that paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, a role that required a lifetime of corporate ladder climbing, and he was offering it to her, the waitress from the Blue Plate Diner. Why me, Mr. Thorne? She whispered. You could hire anyone, an MBA from Harvard, a former SEC regulator. Because they have never had to choose between their principles and their children's dinner, Sarah, Elias said, a profound truth in his voice. They know the theory of ethics. You know the sacrifice. I need someone who has skin in the game. I need your moral compass. He leaned back, finally allowing a hint of respect, even admiration, into his sharp features. The salary is commensurate with the responsibility, but that's secondary. The real value is the power to enforce the very principles that saved your life and, frankly, saved a small piece of my soul. You will be the foundation of this initiative. Sarah put the tablet down. She looked around the Blue Plate Diner, the place that represented her years of struggle, the place where she had faced her greatest temptation, and the place that was now the unlikely launching pad for her future. She realized the $50,000 job hadn't been the end of the reward. It had been the internship. She took a deep breath, the smell of fresh coffee and old grease grounding her. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice now completely steady. I accept the offer, but I have one condition. Elias raised an eyebrow, intrigued. A condition? Yes, I accept the position on the condition that this initiative doesn't just focus on the massive fraud, but on the small, quiet acts of integrity. We need to create systems where honesty is not a struggle, but a standard. And I want the Frank Peterson Scholarship Fund to be permanent and expanded, reaching other single parents who are fighting to stay honest. Elias Thorne smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his usually severe face. It was the smile of a man who had been searching for something priceless and had finally found it. Consider it done, Sarah, he said. The Thorn Global Integrity Initiative will prioritize the small acts. We will invest in the integrity of every employee, from the boardroom to the booth. He stood up, extending his hand across the table. Sarah took it. His grip was firm and warm, a stark contrast to the cold detachment she had felt the first time he walked into the diner. Welcome aboard, Sarah, he said. You taught me a valuable lesson. The value of a person's soul is not measured by the price it can fetch, but by the price they refuse to pay. Sarah watched him walk toward the door. As he passed Mr. Henderson in booth 4, Elias stopped. "Mr. Henderson," he said, reaching into his pocket, "the coffee is on me today, and please tell the cook that the hash browns are excellent." Elias Thorne left the Blue Plate Diner, walking back into the world of high finance. But he was a different man. He was no longer seeking to prove the world was corrupt. He was dedicated to proving that integrity was the most valuable investment of all. Sarah, the new director of ethics and compliance, picked up her college textbooks and her audit reports. She had the security, the education, and the power to make a real difference. Her life was no longer about surviving, but about building. She had refused to be bought, and in doing so, she had been given everything. The quiet game was over. The honest woman had won. And the Blue Plate Diner, a small beacon of light on the edge of Cincinnati, became the unlikely birthplace of a global movement dedicated to the priceless value of a good name.